Right. Well, you introduced him, so I needn't, but will anyway. We have with us, audience, a special guest,
Yay.
Christy of the soon-to-be-released. Well, first, you know, how are you doing? How are you feeling being on the show?
Not too bad. Excited to be here. Get more comfortable in the studio and get the word out, get my face out, you know, and talk about this show that we're putting together.
Yeah. Well, you got to be careful about not finishing a sentence that has the phrase "soon to get out," because it's sort of
That's true.
it suggests things you don't want to imply.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the show that we've alluded to a couple of times, Secular Sexuality, is going to be a production of the ACA.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at starting up in a couple of weeks on Thursday nights, and we're just going to be exploring gender and sexuality and the lens of politics and atheism, and really all of that's to say we're going to be talking about how the world that we live in has really changed the way we look at sex. The religious hang-ups that we often have, the cultural criticism, and just the shameful norms that we hold on to, and learning a little bit more about how to get past those things and how to be safe and have fun.
Well,
Things have changed a lot. They've also stayed the same. So it's hard to...
The more they change, the more they say. I was going to say, I'm glad you could come and sex up our show a little bit.
I mean, I try to sex up everywhere I go. This should be no exception.
Yeah. Well, I am glad to hear it. I'm glad that I've seen you, you know, newcomer, new on the production. Hopefully you're feeling it as welcome as we can make you. But yeah, so you're working on the show. I think it's in test screening. I'm not sure if you guys have announced an official launch date yet.
Yeah, we are looking at the second week in September. More of that to come. I'm sure we'll finalize something and put that out. But yeah, it's been a great experience. It's been great working with everybody here at ACA and getting to know everyone. And you know, the fun part about doing the test footage and like going through the process of getting all vamped up is we can kind of try out the weirdest segment ideas, and nobody gets to see it. So if it sucks, it's okay. But we can just throw dumb ideas out there and see if they stick. And we've been putting together some interesting and some fun stuff.
Yeah, I would say if it sucks on the Secular Sexuality show, isn't that what you're going for? Or
no. Yeah. So the first and only rule of Secular Sexuality is try to make your puns at least good.
Oof. I just got burned by the pun master himself.
Right. No single entendres. Yes.
No single entendres. Okay. All right. Well, I think it's okay whether it's single or double or triple or whatever number you go with. Yeah, so one of the segments that I heard about you actually work in the fields, right? You are a subject matter expert. I'm not sure if I should ask you about that on the show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no mysterious day job. I just actually tomorrow will be completing my master's work in counseling and mental health, and am working towards pursuing a license and becoming a licensed professional counselor in gender and sexuality issues. Oh,
well, congratulations.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's no way for you to mess it up between now and then, is there?
I just have to submit a couple of pieces of paper, but I promise nothing. Yeah. It's been a long, hard road getting this far, and bureaucratic nightmares have been a big part of it. So it would really be like me to mess it up.
Yeah. Well, what I would say, let me just sort of ask, what made you want to get into therapy and gender and sexual therapy?
Yeah, that area in particular.
Yeah, that area in particular.
Sure,
yeah.
That area. That's your single entendre for the
That's right.
All right, we all get one.
Everybody gets one.
Leave our areas out of it.
That was mine.
That's your one.
Right.
Yes, leave our areas out of it.
Yeah, you know, the truth is I had kind of a tough time myself coming up, in particular when it came to those types of issues. I grew up in a very conservative Christian worldview, not terribly far from here, and it was just incredibly limiting. You know, I met my high school sweetheart when I was 15 and was basically told that there was no other option. That she was it, that she and I would be together for the rest of our lives. That was ordained by God. And, you know, she's not a bad person, but she wasn't the person that I was meant to be with for the rest of my life. Go figure. And so in trying to figure out who we were as we, you know, got a little bit older, we started to ask questions. Which got us into some trouble. It really did cause some strife. But we eventually, through watching movies and reading and talking to people and just experiencing the world, realized that one of the places that we were the most hampered and limited was in our sexuality. And in exploring that, I started to realize that that's true of a lot of folks. That we don't recognize sexuality or sex in general as an important part of our lives in the way that we should. We take all of that energy and we put it in these really weird places. We take all of our sexual energy and we channel it into advertising and soap operas and the way that we display bananas at the grocery store, as opposed to putting that where we would want to, which is the bedroom, and the bathroom, and the kitchen, and the backyard, the neighbor's house, and wherever else we might want to put it. So that's how I got interested. Really, was just recognizing as I started to get into counseling and going through that education process, how little of an emphasis there is even in the therapy world. When it comes to gender and sexuality. And it's a incredibly important area of study, and the people that you would theoretically go to work on these issues are very ill-equipped to deal with it. The fact of the matter is you can go all the way through your master's program without really ever taking time to study gender, for instance, as a concept. And that's something that a lot of people need help processing and working through. So I'm hoping to change that, and this show and getting some of the word out is a big part of that.
Generate some buzz.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what I will ask is, actually, it's interesting because I am generally uninformed on issues of gender in psychology. I'm generally uninformed on things in psychology. But how, as far as that as a part of the field and research, how much of that is new or still being worked on? And like, has there been a shift? Because I know it wasn't until the DSM-IV that homosexuality wasn't considered a mental illness anymore.
Yeah, that's true. It's worth noting that it wasn't in I believe the first two editions. It may have been in the second. I know it was in the third, homosexuality specifically. The only reason I point that out is that the DSM is often in response to what's going on culturally. And so we saw this moment where homosexuality was all of a sudden not as hidden as it had been for the previous 50 or 100 years. And listing it as a mental illness was in large part a reaction to a good trend. It was a step backwards, clearly not anything that we wanted to see happen or that we should have ever been allowed to happen. But it is those pushbacks and those problems that I see as a sign of progress. But to better answer your question, I'm not entirely sure I could say that it's getting more of a focus in the literature. I'm not entirely sure I could say that there's more research going on now than there has been. I think that that's likely true, but the reality is most of the research is anecdotal. Most of it is by clinicians who are actually talking to people on a regular basis, and they're making their observations, and they're learning and growing in that way. But in terms of these massive, well-funded research projects, it's mostly online surveys. There's not a lot of good university-driven research, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, because I was going to say, isn't a lot of, I don't mean to diminish the science that is psychology, but when you say psychology is anecdotal, it was sort of like, well, a lot of therapy is, tell me stories from your childhood.
Yeah.
So how does the if you can just touch on it briefly for our audience, how does the process of trying to more systematize and scientifically examine what effectively is stories, I think, as someone's psychology.
Right, yeah. So psychology research is all over the place. And for much of the history of the field, there's been a major data problem. There's been a lack of good research. And we're seeing that change in big ways. I think that is much less of a concern than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. But that being the case, there are a lot of different forms of research, and it depends on what you're trying to look at. It can be incredibly difficult, like you're saying, to come up with a data point. You know, you can't get out your scale and measure somebody's happiness, for instance. You can't do a litmus test on somebody's sexuality.
It's hard to assign numbers.
Exactly. So there are ways that we go about coding that information. For me, the most interesting thing that's happening right now, and that I think is going to be a huge part of the field moving forward, is our ability to aggregate and analyze big data. The fact is there are right now more interesting things coming out of researchers combing through Google search results than there are coming from laboratories, because that's when we're honest. You know, the things that we type into our phone are the things that we genuinely, honestly are wondering about.
Right.
And you can learn a lot about people in that way. The best statistics I've ever seen that resonate and seem to be the most accurate in terms of how prevalent is homosexuality, bisexuality, these different types of things, has all come from search data, because it's a lot easier to get a good answer than just asking a random person.
Right.
That's interesting, actually. I think my mic might have been muted.
Yep.
Yeah, hang on. There it is. There. Nope. There it is.
Ah, there we go.
There it is.
Back
okay.
again.
Yeah, I think that I hit the button and it got sticky. Anyway, yeah, that's interesting. I would ask a little bit more about, like, are there institutes that are, like, what are the big names in institutes? Like, if I wanted to Google, oh, what's the latest research, and I don't have a subscription to LexisNexis or whatever database, where could I find more?
I mean, without EBSCO or something like that, it is hard to see the truly cutting-edge data. I can say that there are a lot of great organizations that are putting out a lot of information. One of the best ones when it comes to sexuality in particular is called ACA'S, the American Association for Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And they link to a lot of good research as well as a number of great books, asec.org. The Kinsey Institute also is still putting out a lot of good information and trying to get the word out on what's going on in the field right now.
Yeah, actually, that one I have heard of.
Kinsey, yeah.
Yeah, Kinsey.
I think famous.
Yeah, he's famous, and the Kinsey scale from 1 to 7. I don't know how much, just on a personal note, that still holds up in the community, because that's how I.
You know, it's old data, and people love to rip on Freud, right? Everybody likes to say, you know, cocaine, and he was obsessed with dicks, and, you know, people love to criticize him, but in the same way that you might criticize, you know, Hippocrates. It's out of date, right?
Yeah.
It seems silly now, but if we, you know, see it in context, there's a reason we're still talking about it.
That's all the information they had.
Yeah, absolutely. So did Freud have data problems? Yes. But I still think there was a lot of great information that came out of that. And in that same way, I feel about Alfred Kinsey, probably more so, because there are some flawed assumptions, and a lot of people, particularly queer folks, do feel a little alienated by the Kinsey scale. Personally, I see it as a outdated form of a very effective tool, because the reality is gender isn't binary. It's not exactly one way or the other. And that's true of almost all human behavior. You know, almost everything can be spectrumized, and I think that that's especially true when you're talking about sexuality. And I think that the Kinsey scale is a slightly outdated but not terribly ineffective way of looking at that.
Okay. Yeah, because it is sort of along a gender binary viewpoint of it, as far as I understand it, which doesn't really comport with the reality of the situation. And
yeah, that's
we're going to get a lot of mail.
Yeah, that's true, and it operates in discrete boxes. You know, you're not a 1.5, you're a 1. And that's very different from the way people actually are. And it's impossible to measure. You know, you can say that you're bisexual, but if you go home and you do the math and you've slept with 12 men and 14 women, are you really bisexual, or are you mostly straight and you know? That's not how math works. That's not how people work.
Yeah, and people don't work like math. That's
exactly.
For sure. Yeah, I would say like I'm familiar with the 1 to 7 straight to gay. I've never taken a test online to provide data for our researchers on the subject. But yeah.
Do y'all remember? I think it was The Spark. It was a bunch of like quizzes. It was a website back when the internet was first exciting.
Yeah.
You know, in the MySpace era, we would be sending each other our Spark test results.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember there were a number of pseudo-scientific tests about like how gay are you or how straight are you, and I remember getting my results back and finding out that I was only like 15% gay, whereas the national average on that test was like 40%, and it's like, well,
I'm an outlier.
Not what I was expecting.
I think I'll concentrate on my sleep number.
Yeah. I was going to say, you said, back when the internet was young and exciting, and the MySpace era, but Denis cut his teeth on Usenet.
Before it got abusive and horrible. Yes.
Those were the dark days before the Facebook. Before
the light came.
Before the empire of Facebook.
Before the Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Before the Wi-Fi.
Well, so let me ask you something that I would like to ask to guests that we have on the show generally, which is, if you're willing, will you share your deconversion story and to what degree that?
Yeah, you know, my experience, as I kind of alluded to, was largely through movies.
There you go.
Yeah, as simple as that is, I had a wife who was obsessive about pop culture moments. You know, maybe she didn't care about soccer, but we always watched the World Cup. She didn't care about, curling, but always the Olympics. You know, those big spectacle type events. So we watched the Oscars every year, and, we started to realize that we hadn't actually seen any of these movies, which is a very current criticism, as they've recently added this new category, this new popular film category. If the ACA wants to put on a movie show, I can talk about that for a full hour and a half on my own.
We may very well, actually.
Hey,
although, this is generally a talk show. I think we have a couple of things we want to get to, but I was unaware that the Oscars added that category. Although, if you're gonna derail your deconversion story.
Well, I was definitely give an opinion because I got a hot take. Okay. It's a new idea. They are this year having a new category for most popular film as opposed to Best Picture.
Sure.
And this is, kind of a response because, Dark Knight wasn't nominated for Best Picture, and now 10 years later people are saying it really should have been. And would we feel okay with a superhero movie being in that Best Picture category? And now this year Black Panther is out, and it's incredibly popular, but it's also well regarded by critics, and it could be on the verge of possibly being a Best Picture type film,
a breakthrough film.
And I just hate the idea of separating movies out based on popularity rather than quality. And you can say all day that, Black Panther was a better film than Moonlight, which won the Oscar for Best Picture last year. And, I can hear that. Clearly more people saw it, and it's not just because of big marketing budgets and international audiences. People saw it because they loved it. They saw it over and over again. People love that movie, and I loved Black Panther too, and I don't have a bad thing to say about it. But am I comfortable with saying that it was a better movie or even in the same ballpark as a film like Moonlight, which was expertly crafted, told a beautiful story remarkably well? The difference between popular art and artsy art, I mean, that's something that I don't know how to parse out. but I'm not
we have an
entirely
academy for
comfortable.
that. So-
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is
they think they can.
It's flawed in its own way.
Yeah.
But I'll say that my experience has been in these past several years with my wife when we were trying to see all of the Oscar films, is that I may not exactly agree with every film that's in the top 10 in the Best Picture race, but none of those films are garbage. Or maybe there's like one that slips by every year that I'm like, why do people like American Sniper? What the hell?
Right.
Yeah.
Just
As
a
an example.
brief pause to say
as an
I
example.
really, really want to use this platform to say I hated American Sniper.
Okay.
Now we'll get the mad
Now
emails.
the mad
Sorry,
comes.
sorry.
No, yeah. All right. We're going to forward them to you.
Yeah,
Send-
that'll be great. I apologize.
No.
But I don't. I hate that movie.
You're
All
looking
right.
for sorry, not sorry. So
But how did this aid in your deconversion?
Yeah, so in watching all of these films,
Yeah.
we started to recognize that homosexuality couldn't be a sin, right? Because we started to believe and come to the idea that it wasn't a choice. And if it wasn't a choice, then that means that God created it. And if God created it and also condemned it, then that just didn't make sense.
What movies were you watching that had that as kind of a...
You know, it was a slow experience for me, but definitely the ones that were really influential were How to Survive a Plague, which is a breathtaking documentary about ACT UP and the AIDS crisis. It was films like The Kids Are All Right.
Okay.
It was a number of different
All right.
pictures that just provided exposure in a way
Right.
that I hadn't had before. And when you
Basically
start to...
not Marvel Universe movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, they weren't. What time period was this, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking? Was it like the 90s or?
Yeah, no, this would have been, I guess the 2005 through 2010 or 12 that I'm starting to have these thoughts and come to this awareness. And it was slow. But we made a project to see as many of the Oscar movies as we could. And as I started to fall in love with these stories, I had a harder and harder time criticizing these people. You know, I, previous to that, had always seen homosexuality as a sin, the way that I saw, say,
Oh, yeah.
rage.
It was deviant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the same way that anger is a sin, right? It's something that you might have a experiential influence on. You know, if you grew up in an angry household, there might be a genetic component, but that ultimately you were responsible to be in control of your anger.
Yeah.
And I believed in that same way. You're responsible to be in control of your gay urges. And
But you started seeing realistic portrayals?
Right. That argument
Yeah.
just doesn't hold water when you meet an actual gay person.
I know.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you start to acknowledge those own feelings in yourself that you had been, you know, putting the kibosh on and trying to control for so long, and then you start to explore those feelings and those thoughts, and it just stopped making sense to me. And for me, I have never appreciated or understood the very like liberal, free-thinking Christianity. The softer, we'll pick and choose, and okay, homosexuality's fine. The Bible's a little confused on that, but the whole the story, all in all, is like mostly good. That just never made sense to me.
Right.
I always felt like if the Bible was the perfect, inerrant Word of God, then it would have to be perfect and inerrant. And if I can't get agreement on the gay thing, then there's really no point in agreeing with the rest of the book. If you're looking for just a way to live a good life, you can pick a much better book.
Yeah, I never was a Christian of any sort, but I recognized the way I treated Christianity, even as a little kid, was, oh, it's just another movie.
Yeah.
It's just another story.
Sure.
It's just another piece of fiction, you know, and it's like it never got its talons into me. But I wasn't I wasn't from a Christian family.
Oh yeah, I mean
like that. So
we were like a barn church type Christians.
Yeah.
So
no, my father
Yeah.
just read tons of science fiction and handed me books, and he wanted me to read everything.
the Church of Asimov.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Church of Asimov.
Oh yeah, you can do lots worse.
Yeah. So what? What denomination was that? Or
Oh man, when you're going to church in a barn,
all right,
there's no denomination involved.
Right.
I mean, there was some time in the Methodists, and there was some time in the Baptist.
Okay.
You know, you're good Southern loving,
I was
potlucking kind of Christians.
I was driving to a friend's house, and I drive past this, obviously metal building church sort of thing, and it's his final harvest. And I'm just going, okay,
wow,
compound to stay away from.
compound to stay away from. Cool. So ultimately, it was movies. Like, did you ever feel like how did you get from there to not believing that a God exists? Would be my question.
You know, on the one hand, it almost felt effortless because it was like all of these thoughts, all of these decisions, this whole logical process, this sophisticated intellectual debate, such as I'm capable of, was existing in the back of my mind almost without my awareness. It was, for years, it was sort of nagging at me. And, I was personally very devout. I was very
you could
zealous.
compartmentalize, I imagine.
Yeah, I was not the sort to go on Christmas and Easter. I mean, this was incredibly monumental to my life, and yet once I started pulling on that thread, the whole thing fell apart almost instantly.
Wow.
It happened in such an overnight kind of fashion, but without a bang. There weren't any fireworks. Nobody showed up to give me my official humanist membership card.
Right. Did you suffer any loss? I mean,
for sure.
Was it traumatic?
For sure.
Okay.
Now that came later. But it for sure happened. The truth of the matter is, who's the most hated person in any religion? It's not necessarily the non-believer, it's the apostate. It's the turncoat. It's the person who betrays.
Right.
And so for that reason,
Right.
I kept my mouth shut.
Of course.
Honestly, it was almost a full year before I started having honest conversations with my own wife. And it was a year after that before I told anybody else, and that was because she outed me. I didn't even have the guts to tell my best friend that I had been basically living as an atheist for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it came with a lot of sacrifice. I mean, when it was the center of my social life. It was the bedrock of my marriage. It was the connection for really everything. It was the lens through which I saw the entire world, and it was terribly shattered and broken. But once you start to rip that out, it's difficult to replace whole cloth. It's a large piece.
Well, did the loss of faith itself
Leave it
devastate or create
devastate you?
Yeah, there was definitely an incredible sense of purposelessness, loneliness, and depression. I as a therapist, I'm very existentially oriented, and so I see a lot of things through basically trying to avoid these certain inevitable realities. The reality of choice, the reality of death, these different things, and in so many ways, religion created answers to those questions. You don't have to stress about the fact that you're going to die. You don't have to stress about the fact that you can only be so intimate and that you are inevitably separate from other people if you truly believe that you're connected by a loving God that is deeply and intimately inside of you.
Wow.
There's your single entendre, by the way.
Two.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a lot to take on. It was a rocky couple of years, and you know, at the time, of course, these crises always come as a result of real world issues. And you know, at the time, I was having some health problems, and I was working just 1,000 hours a week and exhausted, and so yeah, it was a difficult stretch, but I am a better, happier person for it.
Yeah. Well,
We hear that a lot.
we hear that a lot. That's good.
Strangely enough.
Yeah. So, what are you hoping that the show that you're doing here for the ACA, Secular Sexuality, will have a similar effect, or what are you hoping for the scope of that? How does that tie into your story?
Yeah, more than anything, it's about giving people permission to be who they want to be. And oftentimes, that just means letting them know that there are other ways to be. You know, you can't even realize that you were longing for something until you recognize that it exists in the first place.
Yeah.
And then learning how to ethically and safely explore these different areas. So whether we're talking about gender or kink or polyamory or just how to date through a dating app. I mean, you know, all of these different things can be difficult to navigate, and we're so uncomfortable talking about them because we've never really given ourselves or each other permission to. So having a platform where these issues are coming up, where people are getting exposed to things that they might not have ever even thought to think about before, and being a part of helping people put down the burdens that they've been carrying, all of this extra shame, all of this extra judgment, and these other things that they carry for no good reason.
Yeah, I think so. So you said that when you were talking about coming out, you said that you were outed by your wife at the time. Did she deconvert about the same time as you? I mean, I know that
she did. Yeah, and we were actually on one page about that. The difference was, she used to say that you know, I lost my faith and found comfort in science and empiricism, and that she lost her faith but couldn't believe in nothing, so she decided to believe in magic. Those were her own. Those were her words, and. Not any type of like good or organized magic. I mean, I don't even know if that's a thing, but not any type of like codified magic. Just, oh, we're at the Renaissance Festival. I for sure need to get a card reading done, and I need to, you know.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, she eventually found that she had a certain skill with the tarot and asked if I would be comfortable with her pursuing that professionally. And I said very much no. It's one thing, whatever you want to put your own bad ideas into your own head, but I'm not super thrilled about the idea of like funding an opportunity for you to convince other people with those lies. But you know, so we did largely go through it together. We had a little bit of a different experience on the back end, but we were in good shape.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's good. I mean, there's a lot of people, and we hear that from visitors as well. We hear, you know, oh, I don't believe, but my spouse does, or I deconverted, and it turns out that they never took it seriously in the whole place, and I thought they were super devout. And so it was sort of interesting that worked out. Well, you said not organized magic? Sorry. I have a roommate who doesn't believe, but has a sort of, I'm going to research things, fascination with it. What?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to even know how to say what I don't know. But I recognize that there are a lot of folks that have not just these vague notions of magicalness, but like codified and organized, you know, belief systems that center around magic. Yeah, that's as far as I can say.
They'll spell it with a K just to be, you know,
set it apart.
Super cool.
It's weird.
Okay. You said she had a talent for tarot reading, but she believes that it's real? Because the most talented tarot readers don't. and they know like the history of that.
You know,
like the charlatan history, where it's like I'm getting your eyes to look down so that I can read your facial expressions. So I do this so that it's easier for me to fork when it. Never mind.
I don't know. I've met a number of people that are completely earnest about it, and having been a very earnest Christian, I can say that, you know, I could garner incredible insights about people and not intentionally pass them off as, you know, divine, in the sense that I wasn't trying to trick anybody. I really believed it, but effectively I was doing those same parlor tricks. You know,
you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, I was fooling myself at the same time, but I am picking up on people's personalities. I'm picking up on their body language, and I'm telling them that what they want to hear.
It's seductive, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of the things that actually a lot of ex-Mormons I know will say the training that they get to convert people translates into sales skills pretty well. And I, having worked a sales job, use the word sales more loosely and with less negative connotation than I think is generally accepted in the population. But yeah, no, salesmanship or salespersonship, sales skills are very important and versatile. But that's that's interesting. Yeah,
I used to hate them until I needed them.
Yeah, right. Dentists, lawyers. I mean,
So what got you from I don't believe and, you know, oh, I didn't want my wife to spread these bad ideas, to being, you know, what you are now and participating as an activist voice?
Yeah, you know, I suppose the biggest part was my education. It was going back to grad school and studying counseling and getting deeper into the field of psychology and recognizing the need, and also developing a little bit of a toolkit for how to do that, for how to actually offer something to somebody other than, no, don't, religion, bad. You know, I was able to actually have meaningful conversations with people who have suffered. You know, I've had clients who have been terribly abused by their parents because of their orientation. I've had people that, you know, have been afraid to go into certain restaurants, certain parts of town, who live in this beautiful blue island of Austin, but are afraid to road trip because they know that they're going to have to stop for gas in some crappy town, and their gender may not be welcome in the bathroom that they want to go, that they need to go into. They might not feel comfortable peeing on a road trip. And those are conversations that I have with people on a regular basis. And once that started, I mean, you want to be a part of that solution. When you look those people in those eyes and hear those stories, it's hard to do nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult for me to ask a follow-up question because I understand that entirely, because that's how I feel. But,
sure.
Yeah, that's good.